What's up, guys? Let's do some more SQL. So here we have a question called tree node, and we just have one table called tree, and ID is the column with unique values. So this is our primary key, and each row of this table contains information about the ID of a node and the ID of its parent node in a tree, right? So the given structure will always be a valid tree, and each node could be one of three types. It could either be a leaf, right? It could either be the root of the tree or an inner node of the tree. So it's either not a leaf node or a root node, right? So we need to write a solution to report each type of the node in a tree, and this can be in any order. So let's look at the first example, right? So looking at these rows, 1 has no parent, right? So this would obviously be our root node. And then 2 and 3, its parents are 1, right? So these are obviously our inner nodes. And actually 3 is a leaf node since it doesn't have any children. And then 4 and 5, its parents are 2, and these are leaf nodes, right? So obviously if you label these as root node, inner node, leaf nodes, right? And you can just tell by looking at the example, right? Now, and this is like our output, right? So the question is, how do we do this question, right? It's a little bit tricky. But I think based on what we know, we can come up with a pretty good solution. So how about we break this up into different steps? So let's start with getting just our root nodes. How do we tell if a node is a root node, right? So we can tell just by looking at our PID, right? So anything that has a null PID will be our root node, right? And how do we tell if something is an inner node? Well, it would be an inner node if it does have a parent, right? That's one condition, if it has a parent. So 2 does have a parent. Let's clear this. So 2 does have a parent. And how else can we tell? Because leaf nodes also have parents, right? So we could tell by if 2 is the parent to another node, right? So if we look at all these PIDs, right, and we see that this node is in this list, that's how you can tell it is a parent to another node. So that's how we can call this an inner node, right? And we can tell if it's a leaf node if, again, it does have a parent ID, but if we look at this list of parent IDs, if it's not in that set of IDs. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So just to make this a little bit more clear, each node has a parent, right? Except for the root node, which that's how we can tell it's the root node, right? And so 2 points to 1, 3 points to 1, 4 points to 2, and 5 points to 2. And you can tell that 2 is an inner node because 2 nodes are children of our ID 2, right? So if you look at 2, right, you can tell that it has a parent, and you can also tell that it's a parent to at least one other node, right? But a leaf node, like 3, 4, and 5, it has a parent, but it's not a parent to any other node in this list, right? So that's how we can tell it's a leaf node, right? And we can simply just do 3 different subqueries, right? So 1 for the root, and then 1 for the inner, and then 1 for the leaf. and then we can union all these together to get our output, which should look like this, right? So hopefully this makes sense. Let's dig into some coding, and this will become a little bit more clear for you. So here's our editor. Now let's just start with our first query, which is finding our root nodes. So let's do our tree ID. We'll select this from tree. Where, and if you remember, we just need to check that our PID is null. And there should only be one. And we can name this. We'll call this root. And we'll make this column called type. Oh, I think we need to do single quotes. So, looking at our output, 1 is our only root node, right? So this makes sense. Let's make another subquery for our inner nodes. So tree ID, and then we'll say this is inner as type from tree. And our condition, if it's an inner node, is if the PID is not null, right? So if the PID is not null, and if it's not a parent to any other node, right? So if tree.id is not in, let's do another subquery, select P, let's do distinct PID from tree where, and we don't need to check PIDs or parent IDs that are null, where PID is not null. So we should do in, not in, because it should be a parent to another node. So let's look at our output. So 2 is the only inner node that we have, right? So this one looks good. Let's make another query. We'll call this leaf. So leaves do have parents, so this condition is good, but it's not a parent to any other node. So this statement should be not in, right? So let's run this. That should give us 3, 4, and 5, and that's what we get. And let's just uncomment these and union them together. And look at our output. And this looks good. Let's run it. Cool. So this worked. Hopefully this makes sense. Thanks for watching. Leave me a comment if you have any questions.